Blackpool background population, 47 million metro area, 1,396 sq miles, urban density, 32,020 sq mile, GDP per capita, 5,982. Gini coefficient, 67.23. Situated strategically at the mouth of the Tall River, Blackpool is one of the world's great cities. Its relative stability and lax labor laws have made it an attractive destination for many of the world's largest corporations. As a result, the city is a trade hub and a booming center of culture and industry. A rare beacon of progress in a declining world, citizens in Blackpool enjoy a much higher standard of living than most of the world's inhabitants. It is also a city rife with corruption, crime, and extreme inequality. In the last century, a wave of immigrants fleeing poverty, war, and collapse has flooded the city. The resulting population boom saw the city quintuple in size over 100 years. As the city rapidly transformed into a multicultural metropolis, its citizens became increasingly hostile to their new neighbors. They turned to authoritarian and traditionalist forces to protect them, and the city has become defined by fundamental contradictions. Nowhere is this division clearer than in the city's 10 districts. Informally segregated, each of these areas has a distinctly different culture and standard of living. The 10 districts of Blackpool City. Population 375,000. Blackpool City is the historical core of the sprawling, pulsing monstrosity the city has become. Located on two islands in the heart of the Tall River, it is one of the few places where the history of Edania has been preserved through the tumult of the past century. It is fiercely protected by the EPP as a symbol of the nation's proud past. Prime Minister Attlee has taken this protection one step further, heavily investing in the restoration of the old town's monuments and keeping its streets pristine. The area has relatively few permanent residents. Most Edanians are unable to afford the exorbitant rents, and those who can are generally unwilling to trade the modern comforts of the East Bank for the rustic charm of the islands. Once the bustling heart of pre-industrial Edania, the district is now a curated tourist attraction. It is famous for the wide canals that checkerboard the islands, once used to transport goods in Edania's ancient mercantile days. Boutiques, bookstores, historical pubs, and tourist shops line its sleepy cobblestone streets. The only people who live here are academics, authors, and others drawn to a quieter, more contemplative life. Notable locations: Signatory Square, the traditional heart of Blackpool's government. Signatory Square commemorates the 100 original signatories of Edania's independence charter from the Andorran Empire over 1,000 years ago. Today, this impressive square houses the city's old parliament, the Lord Mayor's offices, and a host of museums to the Blackpool's rich history. Temple of Fortuna. The Temple of Fortuna is an impressive cathedral and the traditional home of the Church of Fortuna. The Church of Fortuna is a cult that celebrates courage, diligence, and good fortune. Inside the temple, many of Edania's most favored sons are commemorated for their great ventures. Blackpool University. Blackpool University is the school's oldest educational institution. It is a proud university that boasts many of the city's traditional ruling class as graduates. To this day, it is one of the world's leading universities. The library hosts many of the country's most significant historical documents. Caneston, an ancient and private district where the original 100 signatory families maintain their traditional urban manners. While many prefer life in BBD penthouses or rural villas, these houses remain important status symbols to Edania's old money families. Access to this area is highly restricted. Cavendish. Population 4,250,000. Cavendish is proof that middle-class living isn't extinct in the 22nd century. If you've seen Blackpool in EPP propaganda, it was probably shot here. Built in the 19th century, as Blackpool outgrew its original island home, the district quickly became the beating heart of the city's economy. In the 20th century, it was considered one of the most modern cities on the planet. But by the late 21st century, Cavendish was struggling to keep up. Sprawling corporate headquarters and glittering new towers didn't quite fit between the district's aging mid-rises and concrete skyscrapers from its golden age. During the Civil War, northern Cavendish was leveled by government forces as they pushed to relieve besieged loyalists at the Gateshead facility. Prime Minister Attlee used the devastation as an opportunity, raising a steel and glass utopia from the ashes to serve the needs of Edenia's rising corporatists. Since the completion of the BBD a decade ago, Cavendish has declined in national importance. Now it houses the rank-and-file, white-collar Edenian. The infrastructure is a mismatched patchwork of modern and obsolete, with constant maintenance and construction defining daily life. Local residents jokingly refer to Cavendish as Edenia's largest construction site. Even so, the district still offers every amenity and modern convenience a middle-class citizen could hope for. Notable locations: Cavendish Technical University. While Blackpool University remains the country's premier academy for political sciences, CTU stands close behind in prestige. Known for its elite STEM programs, it attracts researchers and students from across the globe. The Anderan Quarter, Cavendish began as a separate fortification and colonial outpost during the 200-year reign of the Anderan monarchy. After the revolt of the 100 signatories, many Anderans remained, and their descendants still form a proud and distinct community in the district. Cavan's Castle. There has been a fort on Cavan's Hill as long as people have lived in the Tor River Valley. Massively expanded under the Anderan Empire and further fortified by Blackpool citizens after independence, it now serves as a museum and an enduring symbol of Cavendish's historical importance. BBD, Blackpool Business District. Population, 115,000. The Blackpool Business District is the city's newest and most controversial district. Carved from the ashes of northern Cavendish, the BBD was built by the EPP as a purpose-designed haven for the world's most powerful corporations. Today, its sleek towers and glimmering tech campuses rise like glass monoliths above the ruins of the past. Each mega-corporation has claimed its own plot, constructing sprawling, self-contained headquarters surrounded by leisure districts, executive housing, and high-security transport hubs. Most of this area's 1 million residents work and live on these campuses, essentially as corporate citizens. While the area offers a quality of life regular Edenians can only dream of, these comforts come hand in hand with ceding control of your life to these corporations. Critics call it a corporatist fantasy land for the rich, disconnected from the grinding poverty just across the river in the West Bank. But in the eyes of its creators, the BBD stands as proof of Edenia's prosperity for those who can afford to pay for it. Cross Hill, population 120,000. For thousands of years, Cross Hill stood as a city in its own right, before it was slowly absorbed into the growing sprawl of Blackpool. For most of its modern history, it remained a bohemian immigrant district, eclectic, lively, and culturally rich. But as its artistic reputation spread, the district began drawing students and young professionals from Cavendish, rapidly driving up rents. Today, few long-time residents remain. Most have been priced out or forcibly evicted across the river to Harrowton. Still, the district retains its vibrancy, now defined by its youthful population and dynamic street life. Colourful murals climb the sides of crumbling mid-rises, and the streets are alive with vintage shops, underground clubs, open-air galleries, and informal markets. Since the Civil War, Cross Hill has emerged as the political heartland of the Edanian Liberation Front, ELF. The district's progressive voters were the first to deliver a majority opposition parliament, and Cross Hill now boasts both an ALF-aligned mayor and council. While it no longer belongs to the working-class communities that once built it, the district remains a centre of resistance, expression, and hope for change. Notable locations. The Calf. Little Kaffa, known locally as the Calf, is the last remaining Kaffan community on the East Bank. Its residents have created an informal commune to resist encroachment by private developers, carving out a fiercely independent space along the riverfront. The district blends sandy beaches, open-air food stalls, riverside dance floors, and Kaffan street art into a vibrant public commons. It draws students, migrants, musicians, and dissidents alike. Cross Hill School of the Arts, a small, underfunded liberal arts college known more for its spirit than its size. Thanks to protections from Cross Hill's local government, it remains one of the few academic institutions in Edania where political dissent and artistic experimentation are openly encouraged. Its alumni are at the forefront of the city's underground art and protest movements. St. Andrian's House of the Mentally Unwell. Gateshead population. 170,000 Gateshead is a testament to Edanian ingenuity in humanity's war against nature. It is also possibly the single largest utility plant in the world. As rising water levels in the began overwhelming the defensive half-measures of previous governments, whole sections of Edania were lost to the sea. It was partially on the promise to decisively combat this threat that the EPP was initially elected. The colossal construction project that followed nearly drove the nation to bankruptcy. Thousands of pumping stations, canals, and giant walls built to keep the country's lowlands safe from an ocean that now sits some 50 feet above its original level. Gateshead is the crowning achievement of this colossal undertaking. A massive man-made island built in the middle of the Tor River, it houses 4 gigantic gates that keep the river accessible to shipping. Massive freighters bound for Port Grimsby enter the outer gates before being artificially lowered 50 feet to the water level of the Tor. These gates are powered both by the tidal energy drawn from the walls and gates themselves, as well as 2 gigantic nuclear power plants. Most of Blackpool's water is purified here, and massive pumps ensure that the excess flow of the Tor River is pumped into the ocean around the clock. This massive complex web of cutting-edge machinery is owned and operated by the Gateshead Utility Company, which has a permanent lease on the island. The company town they run on the island houses the families of their 13,000 permanent staff, a total of over 170,000 people. The CEO of Gateshead Utility Company is a massively influential position currently held by Attlee's second oldest son, Adrian. Notable locations: Gateshead Utility Company, The Gates, Gateshead Labs, Weston population, 5,250,000. Weston has always had a reputation, and it's always earned it. Once a brothel town catering to sailors looking to avoid the magistrates of Old Blackpool, the district slowly evolved into a full-fledged city of sin. Chiaroscuro Lane, the original vice strip near the river, still serves as its symbolic heart, now surrounded by nightclubs, casinos, and brothels that cater to every appetite and price point. Like Cavendish, Weston boomed during the pre-crisis Golden Age. Rows of proud neo-Gothic towers rose along the West Bank, mirroring those across the river. But the collapse hit hard. Jobs vanished. The district's affluence drained away. buildings decayed, and as the rest of Blackpool tried to hold the line, Weston slid deeper into crime and vice. Then came the war. The final stand of Riker's militias turned much of central Weston into a battleground. When the fighting ended, large swaths of the district were in ruins. What followed wasn't renewal. It was a feeding frenzy. Speculative developers flooded in, throwing up cheap, experimental skyscrapers as fast as the permits and bribes would allow. The result is a fractured, chaotic skyline, part neo-Gothic relic, part half-baked corporate fantasy. At night, the district comes alive. Markets snake through alleyways and underpasses, sound systems spill out onto the streets, and deals, both legal and otherwise, are struck behind every unmarked door. Weston is chaos incarnate, and the people here wouldn't have it any other way. Notable locations: the Sinspire, the Momo's Market, the Lockbox, Cherasucro Lane, the old Port Grimsby population. 270,000 Port Grimsby is considered the last bastion of the working-class Edanian in a city that has rapidly left them behind. Another city subsumed in Blackpool's relentless expansion, Port Grimsby has transformed into one of the world's largest harbours. Over 60 container ships a day are serviced at dozens of dockyards by multiple competing, family-owned shipping companies. Competition between these contours keeps prices in Port Grimsby low, making it one of the cheapest ports on the planet. It also leads to high tensions, as the employees of the various contours are driven to fierce competition by their bosses. These rivalries often lead to violence between the employees of the various companies. Brawling, stabbings, shootings, and acts of arson and sabotage are commonplace. Nothing about Grimsby can be called pretty. The district is dominated by squat tenement housing and massive warehouses. The soot and smog wafting from Bromwich have stained the walls grey and black. Massive walled highways cut giant swathes through the district and can only be traversed by dark and dingy tunnels. However, the citizens of Port Grimsby are proud of their home, calling themselves Seasiders, a pride that is shared by their neighbours in Bromwich. They disdain most of the rest of their East Side neighbours, especially those they feel haven't fully embraced Ednan culture and are staunch supporters of the EPP. Everything in Edania passes through Grimsby. Notable locations: Torside Hall, Slough Free Trade Zone, Bromwich, population 3,710,000. If everything in Edania passes through Grimsby, most of what leaves started its life in Bromwich. During the turbulent years of the mid-21st century, many coastal cities were lost, alongside all their industry. To employ its millions of new homeless citizens and revive a crashing economy, the EPP created free trade zones across the country. These virtually regulation-free districts were meant to attract industry fleeing the war-torn mainland. The scheme was an unmitigated success, and factories sprang up across the country, leading to a massive spike in employment. Bromwich is the largest of these zones. Over 4,000 workshops and factories crank out every product imaginable. Despite providing employment to millions, life in Bromwich's factory towns is brutal. While the EPP has made some efforts to institute regulations since the Civil War, working conditions are abysmal. Its residents work long hours and are subject to near-constant smog. Yet life in the housing compounds of the large manufacturers still provides many perks. In a city with an unemployment rate of 33%, a stable job is better than nothing, and the steel-grown men and women of Bromwich pride themselves on their hard-working natures. While people here share their seasider neighbours' fierce Edanian nationalism, they are far less trusting of the EPP. During the Civil War, Steel-grown labor unions and worker divisions formed the backbone of the rebel forces in Blackpool. Notable locations: Martin Harrow, Towers, Harrowton. 12 million, perhaps no other project illustrates the reckless policies of the early EPP more clearly than Harrowton. As masses of refugees flooded Blackpool, meeting housing demands organically became impossible. Then Prime Minister Milton Harrows came up with a housing scheme so ambitious it nearly beggared the country. 384 stacks, massive towers arranged in 32 separate blocks on a 35 sq-mile grid. Every stack was built as a self-contained town for, on average, 35,000 people. School, work, leisure housing, all under one roof, all at a modest rental rate anyone could afford. The scheme took over 10 years to complete. When the first million refugees were relocated to the stacks, the enthusiasm around the project was electric. Eventually, a total of 12 million people would be moved into Harrowton. Prime Minister Harrow declared the project a resounding success, providing employment, sanitation, services, and security to those 12 million people. Proved harder than simply housing them, however. Too broke to maintain the project, the government only provided minimal support. The new district quickly buckled under its own weight, collapsing into gang violence and ethnic warfare between various militias. When the dust finally settled, most of the towers were firmly under the control of gangs, corporations, and strongmen. It's stayed that way since. During the Civil War, this utter lack of government presence instantly transformed Harrowton into a rebel stronghold. Gaining control over the area proved virtually impossible. Military units sent into the dark alleys and narrow hallways of a stack often found themselves fighting for their lives against half its residents. When the government did finally manage to drive the rebels underground, Harrowton was brought to heel with overwhelming force. The occupation that followed remained for years as the insurgency dragged on. While the official rebellion may have been brought down, the stacks never really stopped their war against the government. Being assigned to the stacks was seen as a death warrant by most soldiers. When peace was signed, these forces instantly withdrew, and Harrowton was once again left to its own devices. Now, police rarely enter the stacks. When they do, it's in overwhelming force, and Harrowton returned to its old fragile stability. People have found their own ways to thrive in the harsh life of the stacks. The entire economy here is informal. No business pays taxes. No doctor is licensed. And if you're lucky, the power works 70% of the day. Sweatshops and gangs are the largest employers. Crime is so common, the police hardly bother to investigate. In recent years, something has changed, however. Bit by bit, the rampant ethnic and gang violence that once plagued the area has declined. The formerly chaotic drug trade has become more organized. Everyone knows who's behind the pacification of the stacks. While no one knows exactly where Milos Durovic came from, everyone in Harrowton knows his name. By coercion, assassination, or agreement, Milos brought one gang after another to heel. Now Blackpool's king of crime, Milos rules over a vast and complex network of gangs and militias with an iron fist. With violence at an all-time low and profits skyrocketing, Milos owns the loyalty and support of most of Harrowton's residents. The people of Harrowton are flamboyant, cocky, and emotional. This is the last stop before destitution, and people here know it. Status and reputation are everything. Appearances are paramount, and any weakness is exploited. The result is a population of colorful personalities with colorful wardrobes. Everyone wears their personality on their sleeve and is willing to fight and kill at the drop of a hat. Notable locations: the Attlee Towns, population 10-20 million, If Harrowton is the last stop before destitution, the Attlee towns are the end of the line. Despite Prime Minister Harrow's best efforts, the mass of hungry and impoverished was not to be contained. Tens of thousands cross the sea every year, and hundreds of thousands are born into poverty. The temporary refugee camps of the 2050s soon became informal settlements. At first, the EPP attempted to contain them. A decades-long cycle began where formal refugee camps became slums only to be bulldozed by the government and its inhabitants relocated to new camps. When those camps outgrew their borders again, the cycle repeated itself. With no solution in sight, the government finally gave up and abandoned the camps to their local populations. Since then, they have boomed, spreading up the Western Hills and becoming informal settlements. No one knows how many people live and die in the Attlee towns, but their poverty is crippling. No one here is formally educated or employed, and people survive off what they can. The government has given up on providing anything beyond the most basic necessities. With no formal education or integration possible, many residents have moved into ethnic communities called towns. The rivalries between these different towns result in frequent raids and race riots. The Warrens, the 11th district population, as hard as it is to believe, it is possible to fall even lower than the Attlee towns. The homeless population had been sheltering in the old service tunnels and sewers under Blackpool as long as they've existed. This squatting reached a whole different magnitude when the government shut down the old subway in favor of the new maglev routes. Now the area is home to tens of thousands of people, living in dozens of cramped shanty towns in the old subway stations. If you're living down here, you're either too poor to live anywhere else or you're hiding from someone.